Hello, my friends. I felt I wanted to make a video and talk about this Twitter friend from Hopewell Chin Ono. And this is, I'm sure, going to be controversial views, but I really do mean this, try to make this in a positive way here. And I wanted to talk about this, and just this is sort of framing. But to set the background, there has been colonialism and the migration of people, which is a very similar thing. Somewhat definition, I would say, colonialism, and this goes back like to the ancient Greeks, very far back, and other cultures, I'm sure, is where you have a sort of a original or a current, that's what I should say, a current established cultural country, if you will, could be a city-state or whatever else, that then sponsors an additional territorial acquisition in a new place while maintaining your original one, as opposed to people's migration, in which you're picking up everybody and moving them into a new location. But functionally, for the purposes of this talk, it's about the same thing. So this goes back to all people. I don't hardly know. I mean, maybe you can look at, I think there's even waves of different groups of people, moving into, say, the Pacific Islanders prior to European exploration or whatever. I don't know indigenous or original peoples. I don't know if that really fully exists to any group that's existing today. I'm sure somewhere, some place got the first set of people there. But so there's always been this element in human history. So it is nothing new, but I'm going to talk about more recent and new, and Rhodesia, Zimbabwe Rhodesia, and Zimbabwe, and African colonialism in Africa. And I know it is something that many Europeans are ashamed of today, feel that it was inherently bad. And there's definite bad aspects, and I'm not going to try to defend the bad aspects of colonialism in Africa. We're talking particularly, say, like slavery. And it was not the Europeans who introduced slavery to Africa. There was slavery pre-existing in Africa. The Europeans just made it more industrial, shall we say, on a greater scale than it was prior to their showing up in certain regions on the east coast of Africa for a long time. Prior to European, even European slavery in Western Africa, it was Arabs running the slave trade. They were, well, we can even say that they're still running it to this day, some of them. But it was like the British who shut down Zanzibar, which was a sort of micro-state that was specifically a slave trading enclave of my understanding. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on any of these details in the chat below. I'm only working with the notes you're seeing on the screen in front of me right now. That was Arab run, right. So slavery is a bad element of European colonialism. But we say here, when we say that, I'm not even going to try to, well, yeah, whatever. Regime has taken us to the 60s. This is what we mean. When Ian Smith stood next to these wagons in the 60s, little did they know that 55 years later they would be unveiled as publicity transport alternative. Slightly confusing English there for me, but and all they've really done was changed it from Rhodesia to NZR, and recently stuck this, printed sticker on the side of these rail cars, and that's what they're using today in Zimbabwe. I don't know that this is the exact rail car in these two pictures, but it is the same basic design and layout and whatnot. It may even be the same paint job, other than the markings up here. It may have not been painted in the last 55 years. Now, what does that tell you about a country? I will say that in 65, in 75, the best practical future for what is today Zimbabwe, then known as Rhodesia, or Zimbabwe Rhodesia, which was a brief country as well, hyphenated and had a black prime minister, though not a communist one. But that was not appropriate. They needed to have a communist one, so they had to have an election with either Mugabe or Joseph Nkomo would win, Robert Mugabe or Joseph Nkomo, and of course Mugabe won, and he got to destroy the country instead of Nkomo. I don't know if there would have been much difference between the two, other than which African tribal group would have been the dominant one in Zimbabwe. I don't know if their leadership styles would have been different other than that. So I'm saying, and why do I think Rhodesia or Rhodesia, Zimbabwe would have been the best future going forward to this country? Is it because these people are, and there is a black woman there smiling, as one of the people in the Twitter thread did point out, is it because these people are white that they're somehow inherently better? I don't think so. But what they are is Anglo-enculturated people, the Anglo culture, if we will. And why Rhodesia or Rhodesia, Zimbabwe would have been the best alternative going forward. It is because, unlike, say, Nigeria, I'm going to stay with the Anglo colonies, or Tanzania, they were trying to build a country in which they and their children's and generations on into the future were going to inhabit side by side with the Africans that were there. Where you have in Nigeria or Tanzania more of, not maybe entirely, but more of the idea of exploitation for the colonial empire of Great Britain and Ireland, if you will. Not that there wasn't tangible benefits of things, including getting rid of, within the British Empire, getting rid of slavery, including the, if not actual, the intended suppression of taking of slaves internally within the empire, meaning one tribe can't raid and take slaves from other tribes or whatever it may be. So that is a key difference. Ian Smith, that gentleman there, was not trying to build a situation in which he exploited either the people or the natural resources of the region, get rich and split, back and live in Britain or back and live in America or Monte Carlo or wherever it might be. And he lived on in Zimbabwe afterwards for a considerable amount of time. After the change of governments. So I think he did finally end up having to move to South Africa, but I'm Sorry if I'm getting some of that wrong. He was trying to build a country. These people were trying to build a country in which they were going to live in. That is different than trying to have an exploitative conditions in a country. And that is key, that is often lost out on places like Rhodesia or South Africa. South Africa has its own set of problems to this day and is going down a bad path. Now, Themba here posted this. You can just see it. I'm trying to keep it all on the same screen. Current, this, future. A bullet train, winning Zimbabwe for change. We are stronger together. And he's actually, we had a little bit of an exchange over here. Continuing. And my response was the future ruler of Zimbabwe, Xi Jinping, and the Chinese Communist flags there. Because who else is going to build a bullet train in Zimbabwe? And you know, both, you know, well, no, they're not going to build any goddamn bullet trains in Zimbabwe. They're going to build tracks that bullet trains can run on, but the tracks are most likely going to be, the steel is going to be set up and built in China. The all the rest of the infrastructure will be built in China and shipped to Zimbabwe. The trains, the engines, the cars will be built in China and shipped to Zimbabwe. And they're going to be indebted to China. There are already, we'll call them Chinese colonists, living in Zimbabwe, running businesses in Zimbabwe. I think most, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think most of these Chinese that are moving to Zimbabwe, some I do believe bring family with them, but I think many of them, they're wanting to exploit the situation in Zimbabwe, make money, and return to China eventually after, I don't know, 20 years of hard work or whatever, and cash out and leave. I'm sure there are individuals that won't follow that pattern, but that does not seem to me to really trying to build a good future for Zimbabwe. It seems to me that China wants to, I don't know, loan Zimbabwe the money so that Zimbabwe can buy and get built a high-speed rail system that then, to pay China back, they will have to send resources to China, copper, whatever, to China to pay off this development. And this development will be something that will end up like this, in that Zimbabwe on its own will not have the resources to repair and maintain it properly, will not have the money to replace these rail systems as they age. So they'll end up being relics that will probably be very unsafe because there'll be bullet trains moving very fast on an infrastructure and system that won't work well. And so that is the future. And Themba here, I guess that assertion is predicted on current prevailing trends. And and who else would build the railways? Rhodesia, as I said, sure had its major flaws, but was the best practical path at the time. Now today, I don't know who would invest in Zimbabwe that would actually help Zimbabwe. And Brandon down here actually posed. Did he visit Zimbabwe, or is that, I don't know. Don't know if that's photoshopped or something, but wearing the scarf. Now, why are we okay? Why could Rhodesia, even Rhodesia that is cut off from the rest of the world, think that it could build a future out of the territory there that Zimbabwe has been unable to do so since then? Why do I think it is that case? And this is a big topic. But what I think it comes down to, quite honestly, is not that these people are white and this gentleman and the Chinese that are coming in are Asian in genetics. I don't think that has anything to do with it. What I think has to do with it is culture. And it's not just an education of knowing how to read and write, or knowing how to do math, or knowing how to repair a train. You know, it's a culture, it's a mindset, it's a way of thinking. And Chinese ways of thinking are different than European ways of thinking, which are different than African ways of thinking. And it's the mindset, it's the industriousness, it's the work for the future, if you will, that gave these people in the past and the Chinese today an advantage. It's not race. Now, yeah, when before the unilateral Declaration of Independence, you definitely had a lot of British outside money coming in, developing Rhodesia over the years. But Rhodesia was, I do believe, very much of a net positive gain for the industrial investments. Same, China will be probably the same. So that does help the situation. I am not going to sit here and say that it isn't easier when you have a lot of resources, including money, from an outside source to develop somewhere in the world. That is definitely an advantage. But I would say it's culture. Now, this is, the African culture, apparently, because we're looking at Zimbabwe. Now, you can try to blame Zimbabwe either on particular person's governance of the country, or their political ideologies, and those do have an element of it. And a lot of current Zimbabweans talk about the corruption of the government. Now, I would assert that it's not the individuals that are corrupt, it's the culture when it comes to governance. Whoever's in power is going to fall to the temptation because of the culture of these people, are going to fall to the temptation of corruption, and the people will accept the corruption instead of immediately violently revolting against it. They will accept it as being just the way things are, as opposed to trying to improve it. Now, and you will come at me, or you could, oh, well, here's this person here who's fought corruption for years. Yeah, there are individuals that, fight it, but we don't see it to a level, to a scale that changes it. And we see South Africa falling more and more and more into corruption, if you will, under the ANC. Now, the ANC have not been following some radical communist agenda, but they are a corrupt government as far as I can understand it, being an American and looking at it from a distance. Now, Americans are colonials. We've colonized and developed America. And this sort of gives me this viewpoint when I look at and see South Africans and Rhodesians. They're not the same as Americans, no, but they wanted to build a country in which they were going to live in. And they, now I was going to say they failed to do a good enough job, but both of those countries have had, under the white rule, we'll say, and it was unfair white rule. I'm not going to try to say it wasn't, but they had massive outside pressures, particularly Rhodesia, pushing against them. So they might have succeeded had you not had massive pressures against, particularly with Rhodesia, massive pressures by the British government. Maybe not more so than the Soviet Union, that was actively arming up armed guerrillas to go in and bring them down, but still massive pressures against them. And they almost, I would say, almost succeeded, or came, part way there. So, and I've talked to some of my African acquaintances. I don't know if they want to consider me friends. That the African culture would do best if it had longer contact with European culture and adopted some of the traits of European culture more so than they have. And I will also say, and as I talked earlier, I kept the comparative colonial experiences within the British Empire. It also does matter who you're colonized by, because we can look at, the god-awful example of Belgium. Now, laterally in the Belgian Congo and whatever, Belgium was cleaning up its act considerably, but if you look at the early days in which it was just horrifying, and you can look at, shall we say, the success or failure of many of the former colonies, and I would say, generally speaking, have a better result if you were colonized by the Anglos versus colonized by the Portuguese or the French or the Belgians or the Italians, or the Germans, though I don't know how they would have long-term fared, but they lost their colonies in the end of World War I. So, yeah, it does matter who you're being colonized by and how you're being colonized as to its results. And as I said, Clyde, it's a big topic. I'm only scratching some of the surface here and not looking deeper. And maybe I'm naive to think that different cultural groups, different genetic groups, whether they be Asian, European, African, could have gotten along, could have developed a joint future together that would have worked out. Well, we'll see. We'll see in 20 or 30 years. I hope to still be around then, to see how Zimbabwe or some of these other countries that have been significantly penetrated economically so far and are now getting heavily politically influenced by China, to see how that goes, and to see how Africans like Chinese management. Will they? And I can understand, trust me, I can understand anyone not liking to be governed by foreigners, if you will, and wanting themselves. But we have seen, and I've been around for a while and watched the African countries deteriorate. And I can look back from before my time in movies made in the back of the 1960s that really thought that Africa was going to really develop, but it has failed. and I'm talking sub-Saharan Africa. And I mean, maybe Botswana is a success story, but Botswana has a very low population density. Don't know how much that versus cultural impact. Maybe it's because Botswanans are all metalheads. They're all heavy metal guys. I don't know. It seems to be the thing there. But I don't know enough about that. But most African countries have only degraded since independence. And it's a tragedy. It's just a human tragedy. Where you have like the Rwandan genocide, famines in Ethiopia and Somalia. It's just a tragedy. And, what do you do? What do you do? Throwing money to problem will not solve it. So giving money to political leaders there will not improve the situation. Oh, you might get a building built. You might even get a railway built. You might get a good road that goes from the mines to the city to the port, so that somebody can extract resources. But that doesn't build what could be. And these people have the ability to build, maintain, run, and understand the technology that can be passed on to other people, but it's not just training them how to do it. It's a mindset of everything that needs to go along with it. And yeah. Well, hey, if you've made it this far, I know what I said is controversial, but you may want to follow subscribe to the channel. You can hit the like button or the dislike button, but and I'd really love your thoughts, whether you're African or not. I'm an American, but hey, the world interests me. The entire globe interests me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to deal with the situation, because I truly believe that the overwhelming reason that conditions are as they are in different parts of the world are based primarily on culture. And sure, the cultures have long been shaped by their environment. You don't wear, bikinis in polar regions, or something like that, obviously. So, and clothing is an element of culture. So, yeah, it is, the environment is shaped by it, but I really think culture is it. And how do you deal with this situation in the future? Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.